SETH Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul by Jane Roberts, read by Martin John, final chapter 22. Session 591, August 11, 1971, 9:03 p.m. Wednesday. Good evening. We will resume dictation. I title this chapter, A Goodbye and an Introduction. The goodbye is my own, since I'm now finishing this book. The introduction applies to each reader, for I hope that you will now be able to meet yourself face to face with a greater understanding of who and what you are. I would like, therefore, to introduce you to yourself. You will not find yourself by running from teacher to teacher, from book to book. You will not meet yourself through following any specialized method of meditation. Only by looking quietly within the self that you know can your own reality be experienced, with those connections that exist between the present or immediate self and the inner identity that is multidimensional. There must be a willingness, an acquiescence, a desire. If you do not take the time to examine your own subjective states, then you cannot complain if so many answers seem to elude you. You cannot throw the burden of proof upon another, or expect a man or teacher to prove to you the validity of your own existence. Such a procedure is bound to lead you into one subjective trap after another. As you sit reading this book, the doorways within are open. You have only to experience the moment as you know it as fully as possible, as it exists physically within the room, or outside in the streets of the city in which you live. Imagine the experience present in one moment of time over the globe. Then try to appreciate the subjective experience of your own that exists in the moment and yet escapes it, and this multiplied by each living individual. This exercise alone will open your perceptions, increase your awareness, and automatically expand your appreciation of your own nature. The you who is capable of such expansion must be a far more creative and multidimensional personality than you earlier imagined. Many of the suggested small exercises given earlier in this book will also help you become acquainted with your own reality, will give you direct experience with the nature of your own soul or entity, and will put you in contact with those portions of your being from which your own vitality springs. You may or may not have your own encounters with past reincarnational selves or probable selves. You may or may not catch yourselves in the act of changing levels of consciousness. Certainly most of my readers, however, will have success with some of the suggested exercises. They are not difficult, and they are within the capabilities of all. Each reader, however, should in one way or another sense his own vitality in a way quite new to him, and find avenues of expansion opening within himself of which he was earlier unaware. The very nature of this book, the method of its creation and delivery, in themselves should clearly point out the fact that human personality has far more abilities than those usually ascribed to it. By now you should understand that all personalities are not physically materialized. As this book was conceived and written by a non-physical personality and then made physical, so do each of you have access to greater abilities and methods of communication than those usually accepted. I hope that in one way or another this book of mine has served to give each of you an introduction to the inner multidimensional identity that is your own. And that, my dear friend, is the end of dictation, and the book is finished. Now you may take a break, a well-deserved one. Author note. The end of the book seemed to come abruptly, even though we were prepared for it. Once out of trance, Jane again expressed her particular regret that Seth's book was done, even though this was what we'd been working for. "What's he going to do now?" she asked. "I can't really believe it's over, you know." I said, "We'll just have to wait and see." We made various joking remarks about what would come next in the sessions, but I could see that Jane didn't really feel humorous. Actually, Seth's own book contained so many ideas for future sessions that our problem would be what to explore first, and we would have the unaccustomed opportunity to carry out these studies at our leisure. Finally, Jane told me, "I'm just trying to relax. He's got something for you. I think about those biblical times, the crucifixion. The thing is, I know what Seth's going to start telling you, but it's confusing. It doesn't sound right." "Well, it's nice to know you haven't run out of words," I said. The following material is included because it supplements Seth's data in Chapter 21. After Seth began that chapter, Jane and I realized we could become quite interested in biblical history, but our time for learning had been brief. End author note. Now, for your edification. Christ, the historical Christ, was not crucified. You will have to give me time here. He had no intention of dying in that manner, but others felt that to fulfill the prophecies in all ways, a crucifixion was a necessity. Christ did not take part in it. There was a conspiracy in which Judas played a role, an attempt to make a martyr out of Christ. The man chosen was drugged, hence the necessity for helping him carry the cross. See Luke 23. And he was told that he was the Christ. He believed that he was. He was one of those deluded, but he also himself believed that he, not the historical Christ, was to fulfill the prophecies. Mary came because she was full of sorrow for the man who believed he was her son. Out of compassion, she was present. The group responsible wanted it to appear that one particular portion of the Jews had crucified Christ, and never dreamed that the whole Jewish people would be, quote, blamed. This is difficult to explain, and even for me to unravel. The tomb was empty because this same group carted the body away. Mary Magdalene did see Christ, however, immediately afterward. See Matthew 28. Christ was a great psychic. He caused the wounds to appear then upon his own body, and appeared both physically and in out-of-body states to his followers. He tried, however, to explain what had happened and his position, but those who were not in on the conspiracy would not understand and misread his statements. Peter 3 times denied the Lord, Matthew 26, saying he did not know him because he recognized that that person was not Christ. The plea, "Peter, why hast thou forsaken me?" came from the man who believed he was Christ, the drugged version. Judas pointed out that man. He knew of the conspiracy and feared that the real Christ would be captured. Therefore, he handed over to the authorities a man known to be a self-styled Messiah, to save, not destroy, the life of the historical Christ. Symbolically, however, the crucifixion idea itself embodied deep dilemmas and meanings of the human psyche, and so the crucifixion per se became a far greater reality than the actual physical events that occurred at the time. Only the deluded are in danger of, or capable of, such self-sacrifice, you see, or find it necessary. Only those still bound up in ideas of crime and punishment would be attracted to that kind of religious drama, and find within it deep echoes of their own subjective feelings. Christ knew, however, clairvoyantly, that these events in one way or another would occur, and the probable dramas that could result. The man involved could not be severed from his subjective decision. He would be sacrificed to make the old Jewish prophecies come true, and he could not be dissuaded. In the Last Supper, when Christ said, "This is my body, and this is my blood," he meant to show that the Spirit was within all matter, interconnected and yet apart, that his own spirit was independent of his body, and also in his own way to hint that he should no longer be identified with his body, for he knew the dead body would not be his own. This was all misunderstood. Christ then changed his mode of behavior, appearing quite often in and out of body states to his followers. See John 20:21, Matthew 28, Luke 24. Before, he had not done this to that degree. He tried to tell them, however, that he was not dead, and they chose to take him symbolically. His physical presence was no longer necessary, and was even an embarrassment under the circumstances. He simply willed himself out of it. He knew that without wounds they would not believe he was himself, because they were so convinced that he died with those wounds. See John 20. They were to be a method of identification, to be dispensed with when he explained the true circumstances. He ate to prove he was still alive, for example, John 21, Luke 24, etc. But they took this simply to mean that the Spirit could partake of food. They wanted to believe that he had been crucified and arisen. Now, I will end our session for the evening. I bid you a fond good evening. Tell Rupert there will be other books, and I thank you for your help, cooperation, and patience. End. Peace, light, and love. Aloha. And there is a very long appendix next.